The sun had barely begun to rise, casting long shadows over the dusty military base, nestled deep within the hostile terrain, where danger lurked around every corner. Captain Maya Lawson moved through the camp with a calm that few could muster in such a place. She was a woman of few words, but her presence spoke volumes. The morning air was thick with anticipation, yet the base was still in the grip of a quiet that felt almost unnatural to those who had lived through countless skirmishes and firefights. Maya's footsteps were steady and measured as she made her way toward the mess hall, a place where soldiers sought brief moments of normalcy amid chaos. Today, however, Maya was not in her usual battle fatigues. Instead, she wore a simple apron over her uniform as she carried trays of steaming coffee to the weary troops. The scent of roasted beans filled the air, mingling with the dust and sweat of soldiers who needed more than just caffeine to keep their spirits alive. Among the rows of tables, the chatter was low, but persistent old jokes and stories circulated like smoke, as if trying to mask the unspoken fear that hovered beneath the surface. Maya moved through the crowd, her eyes scanning faces she recognized from patrols and missions. Some nodded respectfully, others simply glanced her way, unaware that the woman serving coffee was the same fierce pilot who commanded the Apache helicopters in the deadliest combat zones. Despite her reputation, Maya preferred to stay in the background today, blending into the routine of the mess hall, the hum of quiet camaraderie wrapping around her like a shield. But peace was fragile and often fleeting. On the far edge of the camp, a sudden crackle interrupted the dull drone of morning chatter. The radio operator froze his hand, hovering over the receiver. The base commander's voice came through firm and urgent, but muffled with static. The words carried weight, and immediately the room fell silent as all attention shifted to the source of the disturbance. Maya felt a familiar surge of adrenaline ripple through her veins as the radio transmissions grew louder. Enemy forces had launched an unexpected attack on a supply convoy that was crucial for the survival of the base. This was no ordinary skirmish, but a well-coordinated ambush designed to cripple their operations. Maya's mind raced, calculating the risks, the terrain, the odds, and the unknown variables that could tip the balance. She knew her role was about to change from a server of comfort to a warrior of the skies. The other soldiers looked to her with a mixture of hope and fear. As the call sign echoed through the radio channels, they called her Black Viper, a name earned through countless missions where she struck with deadly precision and disappeared before the enemy could react. But today the enemy was not just fighting against a pilot or a soldier, they were battling the legend behind the call sign, a ghost in the machine whose presence alone could turn the tide of war. Maya felt the weight of that expectation settle on her shoulders as she shed the apron and stepped outside the mess hall. The dusty air hit her face, and the roar of helicopter engines filled the sky, reminding her of the life she was born to lead. As she climbed into the cockpit, the world outside transformed into a blur of survival and strategy. Every lever, every switch, every instrument was an extension of her will, the familiar vibration of the Apache. Beneath her hands was a comfort and a weapon ready to be unleashed. The enemy had made a grave mistake underestimating the soldier who had been seen only serving coffee moments before. The battlefield was about to witness a storm that carried Maya's name like thunderback on the ground. Soldiers gathered at the communication tents, their eyes fixed on the screens tracking the unfolding battle. The radio chatter grew frantic. Reports from the convoy described heavy fire and mounting casualties. Yet amidst the chaos, a calm voice cut through the noise, issuing commands and coordinating reinforcements. Maya's call sign was heard, giving orders that defied the desperation of the moment. Her ability to read the battlefield from above made her not just a pilot, but a guardian angel watching over those who fought below. But there was more to the story than just firepower and tactics. The enemy's reaction to her presence was something that caught even the seasoned commanders by surprise. Messages intercepted hinted at a deep fear when Black Viper's call sign appeared on their radar, as if she represented something beyond mere combat capability. Something old, something feared, something that unsettled the enemy to their core. The soldiers listening exchanged uneasy glances, wondering what secret power Maya wielded that could stun the fiercest of foes. Meanwhile, Maya's eyes scanned the horizon, searching for movement, for threats, for any sign that could unravel the enemy's plan. She knew every second counted and every mistake could cost lives. The Apache soared high above the rugged landscape, casting long shadows over the rocky cliffs and scorched earth below. The mission was no longer just about rescue or defense, but about sending a message to those who dared challenge her and the forces she represented. The quiet coffee-serving woman was gone, replaced by a relentless force of nature, ready to strike. Suddenly, the radio crackled again, a warning this time. From the scouts on the ground, reporting unusual activity, signs of an ambush far more complex than the initial attack. Maya's heart quickened as she realized the stakes were higher than anyone imagined. This was a battle not just for survival, but for control of the region, a chess match where one wrong move could lead to catastrophe. The soldiers bracing themselves below could only hope that Black Viper's legend was true, that the woman who had served them coffee moments ago was indeed their salvation in the storm to come. And so, with the sun climbing higher and the weight of the world pressing down, Maya Lawson pulled the controls tighter and readied her helicopter for the fight of her life. The battlefield was waiting, and so was the enemy, unaware that the quietest moments often hide the deadliest storms that lie ahead. The radio chatter was a relentless stream of fragmented reports, coordinates, and desperate calls for backup. The convoy ambush was unfolding faster than anyone could have anticipated. Soldiers scrambled to organize defenses, but chaos reigned on the ground where every second meant life or death. Captain Maya Lawson sat poised in the cockpit of her Apache helicopter, her eyes sharp and mind racing. Through countless tactical scenarios, the enemy had made their move, but Maya was already steps ahead, plotting how to turn the trap into a victory. The call sign Black Viper was no longer just a code, it was a signal of hope, a beacon for those who faced the impossible. The base commanders gave orders with frantic urgency, but they knew the real edge lay with Maya. Her skills and the deadly precision of her helicopter were their greatest weapon. Maya listened intently to the ground reports, piecing together the puzzle of the attack. The convoy was not just a random target, but part of a larger plan to cripple supply lines and demoralize the troops. Yet there was something off about the assault. The precision, the timing suggested insider knowledge. Someone on the enemy side was well informed, and this only heightened the stakes. The soldiers who had been enjoying their brief respite moments ago were now caught in a storm. They barely understood. Maya's voice cut through the static, calm, steady, commanding as she relayed orders to ground forces, coordinating artillery strikes and calling in reinforcements. The other pilots looked to her for leadership, even though she was not originally scheduled for combat duty today. The decision to assign her to serve coffee had been a quiet nod to her versatility, a reminder that every soldier played many roles. But now the battlefield demanded her full strength, and the legend behind Black Viper was about to prove its worth. The enemy thought they had caught the base off guard, but they underestimated the woman who had mastered the skies. From high above, Maya scanned the jagged landscape with infrared and night vision toggling between modes as the sun climbed higher. Her Apache weaved through the terrain with fluid grace, dodging enemy fire and revealing hidden positions. The convoy was caught in a deadly crossfire, but Maya's precision strikes began to shift. The tide bombs and missiles rained down on the enemy's artillery and supply, trucks turning their advantage into chaos. The soldiers on the ground caught sight of their aerial guardian, and their spirits lifted, knowing that Black Viper was watching over them. But the enemy was not easily broken, and their response was swift and brutal. Suddenly, the radio buzzed with an urgent message from an intelligence officer, intercepted transmissions. Revealed panic in the enemy ranks. The mere mention of Black Viper's call sign had sent shockwaves through their communication channels. Rumors spread among the adversaries that Maya was more than a pilot. She was a ghost, a nightmare come to life who struck without warning and vanished before anyone could retaliate. This myth had grown in whispered tales, but now it was. A weapon in its own right, striking fear into those who faced her. The soldiers in the base exchanged glances, wondering how a call sign could hold such power over the enemy. Meanwhile, on the ground, Maya's instincts told her the ambush was a distraction, a bait designed to lure her and the reinforcements into a larger trap. Her mind raced, considering the possibilities. Where was the real threat hidden? The wounded soldier radioed back with critical information, confirming the presence of an enemy. Reconnaissance team monitoring their every move. This meant the base's defenses were compromised, and the mission had grown far more dangerous. Maya's calm exterior hid the storm of urgency inside. Every decision carried the weight of lives depending on her to see through the deception. The enemy forces began to adjust their tactics, increasing their fire and setting up roadblocks, cutting off escape routes. The convoy was now trapped between relentless assault and the unforgiving terrain. But Maya refused to let the situation spiral out of control. She relayed coordinates to snipers and close air support, coordinating a delicate balance of offense and defense. Every strike had to be calculated, every maneuver precise to avoid further casualties. The battlefield was a chessboard, and Maya was the master strategist, moving her pieces with deadly intent. Back at the base, the command center, buzzed with activity, commanders and analysts worked feverishly to process the incoming data and provide Maya with updated intel. The soldiers who had once laughed and shared stories over coffee now prepared for a fight that felt like a test of fate. The whispers of Black Viper's name had transformed from legend to lifeline, inspiring courage in those who faced the dark horizon. Yet questions lingered about the true extent of the enemy's plan and the source of their information leak. The tension was palpable, and the uncertainty like a heavy fog settling over the campus. The battle raged. Maya's thoughts briefly flashed to the moments just before the attack when she had been serving coffee, her simple gesture of support now, a stark contrast to the fierce warrior she had become. The duality of her role was not lost on her. She was both protector and nurturer, a symbol of resilience in the unforgiving world of war. The soldiers looked to her not just for skill, but for the hope that someone was fighting for them with every breath. Every successful strike was a promise kept and a warning sent to those who threatened their survival, but the enemy's fear was not just of her combat prowess. It was something deeper. Something born of history and whispered secrets in the shadows. Intercepted communications hinted at a past mission that had shattered the enemy's morale. A raid led by Maya that had left an indelible mark in their ranks. The call sign, Black Viper, had become synonymous with destruction and cunning, a name that haunted their dreams and fueled their nightmares. Maya carried that weight with quiet determination, knowing that today's battle could define her legacy and the future of the base A's. The sun climbed toward its zenith. Maya adjusted her course, veering toward a ridge that overlooked the ambush site. The terrain was unforgiving with rocky outcrops and narrow passes, perfect for an ambush. Yet Maya's eyes caught sight of a flicker, movement. Something hidden just beyond the visible line. A chill ran down her spine as she realized the enemy had set a more complex snare, one that would test every ounce of her skill and courage. The battle was far from over, and the stakes were higher than ever. The radio crackled once more, bringing a new report from ground scouts. They had spotted enemy reinforcements moving swiftly through the canyon, their numbers growing and their intent clear to overwhelm and annihilate the soldiers. Below braced themselves, preparing for the onslaught, while Maya's fingers danced over the controls, calculating angles and strike patterns. The Apache roared like a predator ready to pounce. But the calm before the storm was deceptive, for in war, the greatest threats often came from where you least expected, and so as the wind whipped through the canyon and the battlefield braced for the next move, Captain Maya Lawson prepared to face the unknown with steely resolve and a heart that beat for those she had sworn to protect. The story of Black Viper was still being written, and this chapter was far from over. The enemy may have planned their attack carefully, but they had underestimated the woman who could turn even the direst moments into a legend whispered across war zones forever. The rocky terrain below Maya's Apache stretched out like a jagged puzzle, a maze of cliffs and narrow passes that could either be a deadly trap or a strategic advantage. The sun glinted off the metal of her helicopter, casting fleeting shadows over the dusty landscape. Her eyes scanned every inch of the ground below, searching for signs of the enemy forces hidden among the rocks and brush. The convoy ambush was only the surface of a deeper, more sinister plan, one that threatened to unravel everything the base stood for. The tension in the cockpit was thick as Maya's mind raced through every possible scenario and counterattack. Suddenly, the radio crackled with a warning from the scouts. On the ground, reports of movement in unexpected directions hinted at enemy forces repositioning themselves as if waiting for something or someone. Maya's instincts screamed that this was no ordinary ambush. It was a calculated maneuver designed to lure her and the reinforcements into a deadly trap. The air was thick with anticipation, and the weight of unseen threats pressing down on every soldier fighting below. The base command was tense, unsure if reinforcements would arrive in time. To prevent disaster, Maya tightened her grip on the controls, weaving the Apache through narrow canyons and rocky outcrops with the practiced precision of a seasoned pilot. The helicopter responded like an extension of her own body, every tilt and turn choreographed in a deadly dance with the hostile landscape. But as she pressed forward, a flicker in her peripheral vision caught her attention, a glint of movement too swift to be natural. Her heart raced as she realized the enemy was not just waiting, but actively tracking her every move. The quiet coffee-serving woman had become the hunted and the hunter all at once. Reports came in that the convoy had suffered heavy losses, and some vehicles were disabled, creating choke points vulnerable. To further attack, Maya's voice over the radio was steady, but laced with urgency, as she coordinated air support and called in artillery strikes to buy time for the trapped soldiers. The men and women on the ground fought bravely, but the ambush was relentless, and the enemy seemed prepared for every tactic Maya employed. The question gnawed at her mind: what had tipped the enemy off to their plans? How had they known when and where to strike with such precision? The intercepted enemy communications revealed a new layer of fear. Their panic was palpable as they tried to regroup and call for reinforcements. Yet the mention of Black Viper's call sign still sent shivers through their ranks. It was clear that Maya was more than a threat to their physical forces. She was a psychological weapon, a symbol of unstoppable resistance. But the true source of their terror was still hidden beneath the surface, a secret that Maya herself was only beginning to uncover as she maneuvered her Apache closer. To the ambush site, Maya spotted an unusual formation of enemy troops, concealed within a rocky outcrop. The soldiers were heavily armed and clearly waiting for a moment to strike, but there was something off about their posture, a tension that suggested fear or desperation. The realization hit Maya like a thunderclap. This was not just a military operation, but a mission driven by something more personal, more ruthless. The stakes were no longer just about territory or supplies, but about a hidden agenda that could change everything. Suddenly, a burst of gunfire erupted from the enemy position, bullets ricocheting off the helicopter's armored shell. Maya reacted instinctively, diving into a narrow ravine to avoid the hailstorm. The Apache shuddered, under the impact, but remained intact as she calculated her next move. Her fingers danced over the controls, unleashing a barrage of missiles that tore through the enemy lines, sending them scattering into the rocky wilderness. The soldiers below seized the opportunity to push forward, but Maya knew this was only the beginning of a brutal battle. In the midst of the chaos, a radio transmission broke through the static, a voice barely audible, relaying crucial information. It was from a wounded soldier discovered near the wreckage, his breath ragged and words urgent. He spoke of a hidden enemy base, a command center coordinating the attacks from deep within the hostile territory. This revelation sent a shockwave through the command center and heightened the danger of the mission. Maya's mind reeled as she processed the implications. The ambush was a diversion, a smokescreen to protect the true source of the assault. With new resolve, Maya altered her course, flying low and fast toward the coordinates provided by the soldier. The Apache's engines roared louder as she approached a concealed valley shrouded in shadows and surrounded by towering cliffs. It was a perfect place for an enemy stronghold, a fortress hidden from satellites and reconnaissance drones. The soldiers on the ground braced themselves for the next phase of the battle, while Maya prepared to face what lay ahead, her call sign. Black Viper was about to strike deeper into enemy territory than ever before. But the enemy was not idle. Their forces regrouped quickly, sending reinforcements to intercept Maya's assault. The radio buzzed with warnings of incoming anti-aircraft fire and coordinated ground attacks designed to trap her in the valley. The danger was palpable, and the margin for error vanished like smoke in the wind. Maya's breath was steady, but her heart hammered as she navigated through a gauntlet of missiles and gunfire, each moment a test of skill and nerve. The Apache danced between death and victory. As Maya pushed the limits of her machine and herself, as she closed in on the enemy stronghold, Maya's eyes locked on a network of fortified bunkers and communication arrays nestled deep within the valley. The scale of the operation was staggering, far larger than anyone had anticipated. The base commanders watched nervously as their best pilot prepared to engage what could be the heart of the enemy's campaign. The soldiers on the ground waited with bated breath, hoping that Black Viper's legend would hold true once again in the face of overwhelming odds. And then, with a roar that shattered the tense silence, Maya unleashed a sudden and devastating attack, striking key targets with surgical precision. The explosions lit up the valley, turning night into day and sending shockwaves through the enemy ranks. The battle cries and gunfire echoed through the canyon, but the tide was turning. Maya's relentless assault forced the enemy into retreat, but victory was far from certain. The hidden agenda behind the ambush still lurked in the shadows, and the real fight was just beginning. As the dust settled, Maya hovered over the battlefield, her eyes scanning for survivors and threats. The wounded soldier's information had opened a door to a new chapter in the conflict, one filled with betrayal, danger, and secrets waiting to be uncovered. The soldiers below looked up at the sky with renewed hope, knowing that Black Viper was not just a pilot, but a force that could defy the darkness. And yet the question remained. What was the true nightmare the enemy feared, and how far would Maya have to go to confront it? The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the rugged landscape as Maya pulled back from the valley, her heart still pounding from the fight. Her mission had changed from defense to offense, from reaction to strategy. The story of Black Viper was far from over, and the next moves would decide not just the fate of the convoy, but the future of everyone who called the base home. The enemy had been stunned. But the war was far from won, and the secrets waiting in the shadows promised challenges that would test Maya like never before. The moment Maya spotted the wounded soldier lying among the shattered remnants of what once had been a supply truck, she knew the mission was changing. its weight pressed down on her like the scorching sun above the rocky terrain. The soldier's breath came in shallow, ragged gasps, but his eyes held a fierce determination that mirrored her own. As she landed the Apache in a small clearing, the dust swirling around her, she hurried to his side, knowing that his words might hold the key to unraveling the deadly trap. The soldier introduced himself as Corporal Jenkins, a communications specialist who had been separated from his unit during the initial ambush. His voice was strained but urgent as he revealed the existence of a hidden enemy base nestled deep within the valley. A command center coordinating the attacks on their convoy and base. The information sent shockwaves through the command center back at base and changed the stakes of the operation. The ambush was no longer just an isolated attack, but part of a much larger and more dangerous strategy designed to cripple their entire supply line. And Maya listened intently. Piecing together the fragmented intelligence Jenkins provided, the base was vulnerable and time was running out. Every moment they delayed gave the enemy an advantage. A plan quickly formed in her mind, a daring assault. That would take them behind enemy lines, disrupt their communication, and sever the command chain. The soldiers who had survived the ambush prepared for what might be the most dangerous mission of their lives, while Maya steeled herself for the challenge. Ahead, her call sign. Black Viper was more than a name. It was a promise of relentless resolve. The ground troops began moving cautiously toward the coordinates Jenkins had given, weaving through narrow passes and avoiding enemy patrols. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Each step forward a test of courage and endurance. Maya kept her Apache low, skimming the rugged terrain, providing cover and surveillance. The enemy base was heavily fortified with layers of defenses concealed among the cliffs, and rocks making a direct assault nearly impossible. The soldiers on the ground relied on Maya's aerial precision and quick thinking to navigate the hostile landscape and avoid deadly traps. But the enemy was no fool. They had anticipated a rescue or retaliatory strike and were ready to counterattack. Reinforcements arrived quickly, flanking Maya's position and engaging in fierce firefights that echoed through the valley. The sound of gunfire and explosions filled the air, mixing with the shouts of soldiers and the whine of the helicopter's engines. Maya's hands moved swiftly over the controls, delivering precise strikes that kept the enemy at bay. But each maneuver carried risks that could cost lives. Her focus was unwavering, even as the enemy intensified their efforts to break through. As the soldiers closed in on the hidden base, Maya spotted an unexpected figure among the enemy ranks, a commander whose presence suggested this was no ordinary battle. The man seemed to be directing operations with cold, calculated efficiency. His eyes locked on the Apache for a moment, sending a silent message that this fight was personal. More than just territory or supplies were at stake, and Maya understood that the enemy commander represented a threat far greater than the forces arrayed against them. The base commanders watched anxiously as Maya and the ground troops coordinated a multi-pronged attack, striking supply depots, communication hubs, and weapon caches with ruthless precision. Each explosion weakened the enemy's hold, but the cost was high and the soldiers fought through exhaustion and fear. The hidden enemy base was a fortress, but its walls were beginning to crumble under the relentless assault. The tension in the valley was palpable, and the lines between victory and disaster blurred with every passing second. Suddenly, the radio buzzed with a warning. A counterattack was forming, a last desperate attempt by the enemy to reclaim lost ground. The soldiers on the ground braced themselves for the onslaught, while Maya adjusted her tactics, shifting from offensive strikes to defensive maneuvers to protect the retreating forces. The Apache swooped and dodged through a hailstorm of bullets and missiles, her every move a blend of grace and deadly efficiency. The enemy was determined to make this battle their last stand, but Maya was determined to break their will amid the chaos. Maya's thoughts flickered back to the moment she had served coffee In the mess hall, moments before the storm erupted, the contrast between those quiet minutes and the fierce battle raging now was stark, a reminder of the fragile balance between peace and war, between life and death. As she guided the helicopter through the valley, she realized that the fight was no longer just about survival, but about sending a message that they would never be defeated. No matter the odds, no matter the darkness that threatened to consume them, as the dust settled on the battlefield, the enemy forces began to retreat, their lines broken, their command shattered. Maya's assault had not only disrupted their plans, but left them scrambling to regroup. The wounded soldier, Jenkins, was evacuated to safety, and the soldiers, on the ground, began to secure the area. The base commanders breathed a cautious sigh of relief, but knew that this victory was only a chapter in a much larger war. The secrets uncovered during the mission hinted at deeper threats and alliances that had yet to reveal themselves. Maya hovered her Apache over the valley, her eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of lingering danger. The soldiers below looked up at the sky with gratitude and awe, their faith in Black Viper stronger than ever. Yet, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the rugged landscape, Maya's mind was already racing ahead to the challenges that lay in wait. The enemy may have been stunned, but the nightmare behind the call sign was far from over. There were secrets waiting to be uncovered, allies to find, and battles yet to be fought. The legend of Black Viper was not just a story of skill and bravery, but of resilience and unyielding spirit, a symbol of hope in the face of overwhelming darkness. Maya Lawson knew that her mission was only beginning and that the choices she made in the coming days would shape the future of everyone she swore to protect. The coffee-serving soldier was gone, replaced by a warrior whose name would echo across battlefields and inspire those who stood against the tide of war. The night had settled over the base, a heavy stillness blanketing the rugged terrain beneath a sky scattered with stars. Captain Maya Lawson sat alone in the quiet of her quarters. Her thoughts, a tangled web of memories, fears, and resolve. The adrenaline of the day's battle was slowly fading, replaced by the weight of what lay ahead. The victory had been hard won, but the enemy's retreat was only a prelude to a more dangerous game unfolding. In the shadows, Maya's call sign, Black Viper, was more than a symbol. It was a beacon that both inspired and haunted. Across the camp, soldiers whispered stories of the fearless pilot who had struck down the ambush and shattered the enemy's command center. Their respect for Maya was boundless, but few truly knew the woman beneath the legend. The moments spent serving coffee that morning seemed a distant memory, yet it was that simple act of humanity that grounded her, reminding her why she fought. To protect those faces, those lives that depended on her strength and courage. The base was safe for now, but the cost of peace was never final, and the enemy's darkness loomed like a storm on the horizon. Suddenly, the radio crackled, breaking the silence with a coded transmission that sent a chill down Maya's spine. The voice was distorted, but the message clear. The enemy was regrouping, plotting a counterstrike more ruthless and widespread than before. The information came from a source, deep within the enemy ranks, a risky intelligence channel that hinted at betrayal and shadow games unfolding far beyond the battlefield.